Hi, I'm psycho-degenerate, and today is a good day to be decaying the morals of Western civilization with anime. That's what I'm doing right now. So today I'm going to talk about second episode of Simoun, Aoi Izumi, and this episode begins with the character Iru going up in the fucked up plane and killing some people with it. So that he blows some shit up and stuff. Anyway, after that, Pariada, this other character, gets mad at her for doing the magical airplane technique that Neville did in the last episode and fucked up at. And her, previous partner, co-pilot person died, kind of, or something. But anyway, Parada gets mad at her for doing this thing, but then she immediately is like, I have no idea that I was doing that. What are you talking about? And she goes around acting really bold, and the other characters find her kind of to be over the top and outrageous a little bit, and aren't quite sure what to do with her yet. So that's a thing. And when she sees Navarro, who's like the lead pilot person, she immediately goes up to her and is like, I want to be your parent now. Like, she's very confident and very, she's just very sure of herself, and she doesn't have anything telling her not to do what she and say whatever the fuck she wants. So I like her. She's the best character. Clearly, as I've decided. But more to the point, she says that she doesn't want to have to choose gender like they all do. To choose one of these roles to fit into in society that they're laid out for her, like the gendered roles. And she says she doesn't want to choose a gender, and that she's fighting the war so that she doesn't have to, because as long as she's fighting the war, they don't make her. And this is kind of right next to this other pilot who's leaving to go to the spring where they choose their genders and their gender shit, and they go and choose their genders at this spring, and she goes there to get away from the war, and but she's not sure what choice she should make, even right before she goes in. When she's going in, they start playing the main theme on a piano arrangement of the main theme from the opening, and it plays through until like afterwards when she's telling Neville that she's going to be male and her new name is Elifu, and Neville says her new name and she breaks down crying because she was forced to go to she's kind of inevitably forced into going to the spring, more or less, when she wasn't ready to make a decision, because it's either that or they have to fight in the war and do things that are like that. And I think this is, in the last episode of this, I talked about the Takarazuka, and I'm going to talk about that more because in the guy who founded the Takarazuka Review, this dude, he was trying to get these girls ready for this Meiji idea that they have to be the good wife and wise mother. This wasn't in the Meiji period. The review started out in the Taisha period, pretty much right away in the Taisha period after a couple of years. And after the Taisha period, in the early Showa era, the Empire of Japan is going and all that and having fascism. And the Takarazuka Review, they would dress up in really military inspired uniforms and put on propaganda for the empire, basically. And that these women who were actresses for that would basically do that. It's either you do that or you get married and have children for the empire. And if we and it's not like they were similarly to the characters in the show, they're fighting the war, but there's the expectation that they'll eventually become part of society, and there's the same expectation with the Takarazuka Review. They become a good wife and wise mother eventually. Sure, they might get to dress up as men and subvert gendered roles now, but that's all in service of turning them into a good wife and wise mother in the long run. And you can defy, they were able to defy the gender roles to some degree, but inevitably the system didn't and doesn't exist for women. It doesn't exist so that girls and women can have freedom. And the exploitation of women is ingrained into society. It is something that is very much there's very much a fundamental part of making society operate. It's built into the system. It's been built into the previous system. It's been built into the systems all around the world. Maybe not every single system, but most of the ways that are set up that people do things are built on women having a certain role, and like, people need to understand that just because something's subverting gender roles doesn't mean that it is feminist. Something can, like, you can't replace one patriarchy with the other and just be like, oh, well, that solves the problem. The and like, I think that's an interesting thing to think about in relation to the show. Like, a lot of the show, like, kind of shows a lot of Western liberal feminists will talk about media extensively, but not talk about things like past that, and they'll like be like, oh, this TV show is subverting gender roles. How is it doing that? Why? 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 You've got to think about these things critically. Ask yourself, what is this doing? What is this saying? Before you just declare things feminist. And, like, something might look on the surface like it's breaking a gender role even, but not actually be doing that ultimately. It might just be reinforcing the gender roles. And you've really got to think about why and how these things are, like, things that society is pushing. Like, if you look at society, like, either the culture industry or, like, as a whole, the society, businesses, and governments, a lot of them are going to be dominated by men. A lot of the highest political offices are dominated by men. There's a lot of them are dominated by men, and, like, companies are generally led by men. Film directors are like 97% men, I think. Not 100% sure on that, but it's something along those lines, or it was at some point at least. And you've really got to ask yourself what things are saying when you look at them, because everything that, like, mainstream society is pushing is for the good of mainstream society, not for the good of, like, the people per se, but for the good of the governments and businesses. Like, whatever exists in, like, you look at, like, Washington Post, they don't run that many stories that are against the USA, do they? You look at other, like, American news sources that are tied to the government. They aren't saying negative things about the government in the same way that a lot of people in other places are, They're saying propaganda, and a lot of it doesn't have very much substance beyond that. It's just propaganda. Sometimes it's half true, sometimes it's true, but sometimes it's not true at all, but, like, it's always being presented in a way that makes it propaganda. And you've really got to think about things and what they're saying and why and what it's about. Like, you can't just say, well, obviously this thing is feminist, unless you think about it for a good long while and really know what it's saying and what the point of it is you can take something positive out of something that is like very negative, but ultimately it's you'll be better for it if you realize the negative elements that exist within the whole. Um, and you do that by thinking critically about these things. And like, it's not just things that are like for men that are being like the Takarazuka review has largely women as fans, but it's not just things that are for men that are being filtered through the male gaze and the heterosexual gaze and being put in this kind of an angle where they are showing things from a certain perspective, but it's things that are made for women too, and it's not just about, well, a lot of the time it's related to male gaze is related to people wanting to look at and of men wanting to look at and sexualize women and see them in a certain way and then being displayed in that way for men's pleasure. That's definitely a part of it, but that's not the whole thing. And I think that's important to realize, that things being made to cater to male viewers, maybe not cater to male viewers, but things that are being filtered through the lens that makes them acceptable to male viewers and heterosexual viewers, is not just the fact that they are for men. It's not like that's the only reason. It's because society is dominated by those groups. Like, because society is dominated by certain people, those people have everything, including things that are marketed towards other groups, made specifically in a way that is inoffensive to them a lot of the time. Like, because your directors and your owners and the people who have the money that's behind these like artistic creations or news are generally men, and some other groups beyond that are generally in control of things as well, like these things are being like filtered through the lens of what is acceptable to men. And I think that that's something that's pretty interesting and important, that I think that you can definitely see in this show, in this episode of this show, kind of starting to get out there. So I guess I'll watch another one of these next week, and if you care, then watch it, I guess. Thanks.